20 years ago, a teenager in South Valley disappeared after his school dance, vanishing completely without a trace, leaving his family devastated and the community in crisis. Authorities suspected the group of friends who were last seen with him might be involved, but with no body found and far too few leads to follow, the investigation quickly reached a complete dead end. Yet, throughout all those years, a cold case unit never gave up, clinging to the slim chance that the truth still lay hidden somewhere in old data and contradictory statements. Then, one day, in the remote Jemez Mountains, a detail that everyone had overlooked for more than a decade suddenly came to light. A small detail, but one powerful enough to turn the entire case in a way no one could have imagined. Before we dive deep into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit subscribe. On the night of October 14, 2006, the South Valley area south of Albuquerque became busier than usual when the South Valley Community Youth Hall hosted a weekend dance for local teens. This was a familiar community event that drew dozens of high school students from around South Valley. Ethan Rios, 15 years old, was there from early in the evening and was noted by friends as behaving normally throughout the event. Starting around 9:20 p.m., the hall began to thin out, with many groups heading to the parking lot to wait for parents or walk home. Around 9:40 p.m., Ethan was seen leaving the hall, heading toward the main exit, and then down the steps leading to the parking lot. There, some young people standing and chatting noted Ethan appearing at the edge of the group, seemingly looking for a direction or observing his surroundings before leaving the area. At the same time, a dark red Chevy Impala, a fairly common car type in New Mexico at the time, was seen parked at the outer edge of the parking lot, its headlights shining straight out toward the road, but not moving. The vehicle didn't draw particular attention, but its presence coincided with the moment Ethan left the lit area of the hall and walked along a darker path leading to the main road. By family rules, Ethan had to be home before 10 p.m., and he usually followed the curfew. However, when the clock passed 10:15 p.m. and Ethan still hadn't returned, his family began calling his phone, but received no response. From 10:30 p.m., they walked the route Ethan typically took home, but saw no sign of him or any indication he was on the way. By 11 p.m., the family expanded the search to nearby neighborhoods, checking along the road from the youth hall to home and asking awake residents, but no one had seen Ethan after he left the hall. Near midnight, they contacted Ethan's friends, confirming he had not returned to the hall since leaving. There were no reports of Ethan taking a bus, hitchhiking, or meeting anyone known after 9:40 p.m. Between 12 o'clock and 1 a.m., the family continued searching the area around the community youth hall, passing through the parking lot, the field behind it, and the strip of low trees leading to open land, but found no trace or item that could be linked to Ethan. They tried to guess whether he might have gotten lost or turned another way, but found no reasonable explanation for deviating from his usual route. By 1 a.m., after more than 3 hours of fruitless self-searching, the family had no choice but to make the final decision, call 911, and officially report Ethan Rios missing. When the 911 call center received the report at exactly 1 a.m., the case was immediately classified as missing juvenile, since the victim was a minor and had been out of contact beyond a safe time frame. Just 18 minutes later, a patrol unit from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office arrived at the Rios family home, beginning the initial steps of the investigation process. There, officers recorded the initial account from Ethan's parents, including the time Ethan left South Valley Community Youth Hall, his habit of always coming home on time, and the family's full 3-hour search efforts before calling police. Officers asked the family to reconfirm specific timelines, check unanswered calls, and provide a detailed description of the clothing Ethan was wearing that evening. After the initial verification, the patrol team moved to the youth hall to survey the area where Ethan was last seen. By then, the hall was closed, leaving only the dark parking lot and a few scattered streetlights. Officers checked the main walkway, parking lot, and side area of the hall, where Ethan was recorded appearing after leaving the event. They conducted a search within a 1-block radius around the youth hall, following possible pedestrian paths toward Ethan's home. During the search, police knocked on doors of homes still showing lights to ask if anyone had seen a teenager walking around 9:40, 10 p.m., but no witness provided verifiable information or reported any unusual movement matching Ethan's disappearance time. At this point, officers also noted the area's condition: no signs of a struggle, no clearly abandoned items in plain view, and no suspicious vehicles left behind. From 2:05 a.m., police began contacting Ethan's friends who had been at the dance to gather preliminary information. Some were called that night and confirmed they had seen Ethan leave the hall, but had no idea where he went afterward. These early statements mostly centered on Ethan leaving the group earlier than others and not stating a clear reason. Police also asked the friends to describe Ethan's condition in the hours before he left to determine if there were any unusual signs or notable conflicts, but all accounts indicated a completely normal evening. Meanwhile, another group of officers continued expanding the scene survey, checking residential streets around Isleta Boulevard and intersections near the youth hall to identify Ethan's possible direction of travel. They checked places where teens commonly hung out, but all were quiet in the early morning hours. There were no direct witnesses, no signs Ethan left the area by personal or public transportation, and no incidents reported matching his disappearance time. Though initial search results were very limited, police fully documented every step to ensure no detail that could guide later investigation was overlooked. When efforts to search within the immediate radius of the youth hall yielded no significant progress, the on-duty team determined that collecting security camera footage would be the most viable approach to reconstruct movement around the time Ethan lost contact. So from 3 a.m., 2 officers were assigned to gather all available camera sources in the area, including convenience stores along Isleta Boulevard, a gas station near the northern intersection, and a private garage 3 blocks from the hall. Although most cameras had low resolution and only captured blurry distant images of the youth hall parking lot, this remained the only data source that could help investigators reconstruct vehicle movements in the 9:30, 10, 15 p.m. window. While reviewing each segment, police noticed a short frame showing headlight reflections from a dark red vehicle appearing at the edge of the frame, exactly at the position of the Impala described in initial statements from Ethan's friends. The image was not clear enough to read a license plate or confirm the body style, but the color and timing matched the window when Ethan was last seen. To strengthen an objective assessment, the investigative team mapped the area based on the walking route Ethan would likely have taken if leaving the hall to head home as usual. The standard route was less than a mile, passing through a sparsely populated residential area and connecting to Isleta Boulevard, which had evening traffic activity. Police assessed lighting levels along the road, noting dark sections, low traffic turns, and blind corners not covered by any camera. When cross-referencing data, they found no camera-captured footage of a teenager walking matching Ethan's description. This was especially notable because if Ethan had followed his usual route, at least one convenience store or gas station camera should have picked up his figure or shadow in motion. The complete absence of Ethan in footage throughout the 9:40 to 10:15 p.m. window led investigators to consider the possibility that he did not walk away from the area. Police began analyzing the distance from the youth hall to the camera position that captured the red vehicle. If the vehicle had stopped in a shadowed spot outside the parking lot lights and then moved right after Ethan passed by, it would explain why the camera only caught a partial headlight. An officer tasked with diagramming camera positions identified narrow viewing angles and weak sweep ranges, meaning a vehicle leaving the parking lot southward would appear in frame for less than a second before disappearing from view. These analyses led police to lean toward the hypothesis that Ethan may have approached, or been approached by, a vehicle in the parking lot area rather than leaving alone. To test this hypothesis, the team expanded canvassing to homes near the open lot about 2 blocks from the youth hall. Some homes had doorbell cameras, but most were either off at the time or did not retain data long enough for immediate retrieval that night. Still, one camera on a porch east of Las Padillas Road captured headlights of a red vehicle passing by around 9:47 p.m., heading out of the residential area. Though direct connection could not be confirmed, investigators noted the find because the timing aligned with the window after Ethan was last seen. From the collected data, Police built a composite diagram, including the suspect vehicle's position, direction of travel, obscured angles, and recurring timeframes to check for matches. When stringing the details together, they noted an anomaly. Ethan's complete disappearance from the regional camera system made the hypothesis of leaving the area by vehicle more compelling than walking the normal route. The team continued reviewing footage from a garage a few hundred meters from the youth hall. A road-facing camera captured a red vehicle passing around 9:52 p.m., but due to darkness and low camera quality, it could not yet be confirmed as an Impala or another model. However, the timing data was retained because it aligned with the period Ethan should have been on his way home. After compiling the scattered camera data points, investigators confirmed no footage showed Ethan leaving the area on foot along his route. The total absence of the victim's movement trail made the possibility of Ethan voluntarily leaving the youth hall far less convincing, while increasing the weight of the hypothesis that he had gone with, or been taken in, a vehicle leaving the scene. Based on this assessment, police officially added the vehicle transport hypothesis to the priority possibilities for the next investigative steps. When cameras could provide no further direct evidence related to Ethan, the investigative group had to shift focus to the remaining source of information, the last people to have contact with the victim before his disappearance. Starting in the early morning hours and continuing into the afternoon of October 15th, police compiled a list and summoned the three most important figures: Cole Ramirez, Ryan Delgado, and Adrian Cruz, three classmates who were at the dance and recorded near the parking lot area when Ethan left the hall. Police scheduled them to come in at the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Juvenile Division, starting with Cole Ramirez, whom friends pointed out as being near the exit when Ethan passed by. Cole stated he left the hall around 9:35 p.m. to wait for a ride, and said he didn't clearly recall seeing Ethan at that time because the parking lot area was pretty crowded. When asked to pinpoint his exact standing position, Cole described himself near the west fence, a location matching a camera angle police had reviewed but which showed no image of Ethan or any notable interaction. Cole's statement was therefore recorded as an unverified fact. The second person interviewed was Ryan Delgado. Ryan said he left the hall later than Cole, around 9:45 p.m. after the final dance ended. Ryan stated he had seen Ethan leave early but didn't know where he went. When asked about the timing of Ethan's departure from the dance, Ryan provided a 9:35–9:40 p.m. window, consistent with initial witness description. Investigators asked Ryan to list who was standing near Ethan at that time, and Ryan mentioned Adrian Cruz, who was talking with a few others by the curb. This statement led police to identify Adrian as needing the most thorough interview, since he was reportedly closest to Ethan in the final moments. Ethan appeared. Adrian was interviewed that same afternoon. He described standing on the east side of the parking lot, seeing Ethan walk past but not speaking to him, and said Ethan appeared in a hurry as he headed toward the road. This matched information from another witness, but still lacked camera verification. When asked if anyone else followed Ethan or stood near the exit at that time, Adrian replied he hadn't noticed, adding that the parking lot had many cars running, including one red one, though he couldn't make out the type. Though his answer was not strongly affirmative, it aligned with the red vehicle image observed by police from the convenience store camera system. After completing the first three statements, police created a timeline of departures: Cole at 9:35 p.m., Ethan at 9:40 p.m., Ryan at 9:45 p.m., Adrian not leaving immediately, but remaining in the parking lot area. However, these facts were not fully consistent, particularly Cole's claim of not seeing Ethan despite being near the exit. This inconsistency was not enough to form suspicion, but was noted in the file for later comparison. During statement collection, police also recorded a tangential but potentially relevant detail: the relationship between Ethan and Maya Solis, a female classmate who often talked with Ethan. Some friends said Ethan had texted Maya during the evening, prompting police to examine whether Ethan left early to meet Maya or someone connected to that relationship. When interviewing Maya, police verified she left the hall with her girlfriends around 9:20 p.m. and had no plans to meet Ethan afterward. Maya said she received a text from Ethan around 9 p.m. with content only about the dance being crowded and nothing unusual. She had no further contact with Ethan after that and was unaware he had left the hall early. Maya's information ruled out the possibility of a private meetup plan between them, but also showed Ethan behaving normally before disappearing, with no signs of wanting to leave early for personal reasons. Beyond the direct friends who saw Ethan, police reviewed additional lists of those who might have interacted with Ethan that evening, including classmates, parents picking up kids, and some people standing outside the hall. No one reported conflicts, arguments, or unusual behavior related to Ethan throughout the evening. Officers also returned to the youth hall for quick interviews with 2 event staff members. They confirmed Ethan had no incidents inside the hall and left completely normally. When compiling all statements, the investigative team defined the scope of last contacts with Ethan as the group of 3 male friends in the parking lot, 2 female friends who saw Ethan pass by, and 1 parent who happened to walk past the exit. No one in this group provided verifiable information about Ethan leaving the hall by vehicle or on foot in any direction. Though the circle of contacts was now clearer, police still could not determine Ethan's final move, the biggest gap in the entire sequence of events on the night of October 14th. On the morning of October 16th, when reviewing the friends' statements yielded no breakthrough and the area cameras still provided no direct trace, the ground search operation was expanded beyond the vicinity of the youth hall. A semi-professional search team coordinated by Bernalillo County, along with local volunteers, was deployed along the southwest direction. The transitional area between the South Valley residential zone and the sparse desert scrub leading toward the Rio Grande River. This was a direction that received little attention on the first night because it was not Ethan's usual walking route, but the area featured open terrain, high concealment, and had been reported by residents as a place where vehicles stopped late at night, factors that prompted the search team to examine it closely. Around 10:15 a.m., a volunteer team member discovered an object caught in a yucca bush approximately 300 meters from the road leading into the desert. Upon closer approach, he realized it was a black and white athletic shoe, matching the style of the pair Ethan was described as wearing on the night he went missing. The object lay alone on the sandy ground, with no footprints around it, no bag, clothing, or other items accompanying it. The discoverer marked the location and immediately called the scene team. When police officers arrived, they photographed it, measured the position, and collected the shoe using standard evidence sealing procedures. Ethan's father was asked to come and view it, but was not yet permitted to approach the scene. Instead, police sent photos of the shoe to the family for confirmation. Around 11:30 a.m., Ethan's family confirmed it was indeed the left shoe Ethan wore on the evening of October 14th. They affirmed that this pair belonged to Ethan, and there was no reason for him to leave one shoe in the desert. This confirmation turned the shoe discovery location into the first direct link to Ethan since he left the youth hall. After the evidence was verified, the search radius was immediately expanded to more than 500 meters in the western and southern directions. A K-9 team was mobilized to sweep dense brush clusters, small trails leading deeper into the desert, and areas capable of concealing objects. However, the terrain here was filled with low bushes, seasonal water gullies, and many blind spots that made the search difficult. The strong morning wind also affected the K-9 unit's scent tracking ability. Nevertheless, the search team continued to focus around the shoe discovery point to look for any signs of movement, drag marks in the soil, tire tracks, or footprints. No clear signs were visible on the ground, likely because the dry sandy soil and strong wind had erased most traces in the more than 36 hours since Ethan's disappearance. When analyzing the location, police noted that the shoe discovery point was quite far from Ethan's usual walking route home and not convenient for him to reach on foot if he had simply left the youth hall to head home. This was recorded as an anomaly. Either Ethan had been brought there by vehicle, or he had been forced to leave a vehicle in this area. To test this possibility, officers drew a temporary diagram with 3 access routes leading to the shoe location. They considered the dirt road commonly used by pickup trucks to reach the riverside lot, a rarely used narrow path, and a route suitable only for high-clearance vehicles. However, no fresh tire tracks remained due to the dry ground being windblown. While the K-9 team continued searching southward, the volunteer team expanded westward, where there were low mounds and larger bush clusters that could conceal small items. The investigative team also instructed groups to search in a grid pattern to ensure no area within the newly expanded radius was missed. By early afternoon, although no additional evidence was found, police determined that the solitary appearance of the shoe was the first clear indication that Ethan had left or been taken from the youth hall area in an unexpected direction, increasing the suspicious nature of the case. When reanalyzing the three friends' statements, police checked whether any of them had mentioned or implied that Ethan might have headed southwest. No one referred to the desert area, no one described Ethan intending to leave the residential zone, and there was no activity at the youth hall that would require Ethan to head in that direction. This led investigators to question whether the shoe ended up there because Ethan dropped it himself or because of external influence. After completing collection steps, police transported the evidence to the forensics lab to check for traces such as adhering dirt, foreign fibers, or cuts tears. Preliminary results showed the shoe had no signs of severe tearing, no blood, but carried the characteristic desert dust of the southwest Albuquerque area. These results did not determine why the shoe was left behind, but reinforced its position as a key piece in the timeline of Ethan leaving the populated area. From that same afternoon, the investigative team decided to further expand the search range along the direction of the shoe discovery and created a detailed map of the area as a basis for subsequent analysis steps. The left shoe became the first piece of evidence capable of providing clues about Ethan's direction of movement or the direction a vehicle took him, opening an entirely new search axis for the investigative force. The discovery of Ethan's left shoe in the southwest desert area immediately forced the investigative team to re-examine all initial assumptions about his direction of travel after leaving South Valley Community Youth Hall. On October 17th, investigators began constructing a timeline, location diagram based on the latest data. First, they marked the time Ethan was last seen as approximately 9:40 p.m. on October 14th in the Youth Hall parking lot. Next, they cross-referenced the shoe discovery location, which was nearly a 1.5 mile straight-line distance from the hall, deep in the desert, with no clear pedestrian path, and far from the route home that had been assessed as Ethan's familiar travel option. When combining these 2 points, with the 36-hour time frame from Ethan's disappearance to the evidence being found, the investigative team quickly realized that it was nearly impossible for Ethan to have walked on his own from the youth hall to that desert location. Not only because of the long distance and rough terrain, but more importantly, because there were no residential paths, no lighting, and no realistic reason for Ethan to leave the safe road home to venture deep into such a desolate area. An officer responsible for map analysis argued that if Ethan had walked in any direction from the youth hall, he would have passed through multiple camera-covered segments and likely come into view of residents or passing vehicles. However, the fact that no camera captured any image of Ethan throughout the period after leaving the hall further reinforced the assessment that he did not leave the area on his own initiative. Based on distance, time, and terrain, the investigative team concluded that Ethan walking on his own to where the shoe was found was not plausible. This led them to shift to evaluating the possibility that Ethan had been transported to that area by motorized vehicle. The next step in the analysis process was to compile reports from residents about the appearance of the dark red vehicle on the night Ethan went missing. On the night the missing person information was released, police received several scattered calls from residents around Isleta Boulevard and Los Padillas Road, describing a vehicle similar to dark red, seemed like an old sedan, engine louder than normal, or stopped for a very long time for no apparent reason. These reports initially held little analytical value, but the shoe discovery gave these scattered data new significance. The investigative team compiled all statements related to the red vehicle and cross-referenced them with the time frame from the gas station camera, garage camera, and porch camera on Los Padillas Road. When piecing them together, they noticed a notable matching sequence. Around 9:47 p.m., the porch camera recorded headlights of a red vehicle leaving the area near the youth hall. At 9:52 p.m., the garage camera captured a red vehicle appearing on a road segment a few minutes' drive away. And at the same time, there was no record of Ethan walking along the route home. The investigator responsible for route analysis attempted to reconstruct the red vehicle's travel path based on average residential speeds in South Valley. Accordingly, a vehicle leaving the youth hall parking lot around 9:45 p.m. could easily reach the area leading into the southwest desert within 10 minutes, matching a possible time of around 9:55 p.m., the plausible window when Ethan could have been brought to the later shoe discovery site. This analysis added an important factor. The distance from Ethan's last seen point to the shoe discovery site formed a route that only made sense if traveled by vehicle, not on foot. From here, the investigative group began considering the possibility that Ethan had not left the hall in a normal state and may have been approached, coerced, or lured into a vehicle. All data collected in the first 3 days showed no signs of argument or conflict between Ethan and anyone at the youth hall, so the possibility of him voluntarily entering an acquaintance's vehicle remained. But the possibility of coercion was becoming increasingly noteworthy. To strengthen this hypothesis, police compared the shoe discovery location with routes commonly used to access the southwest desert. Results showed only 3 suitable vehicle entry points. 2 of them were adjacent to areas residents had reported as teen hangouts, or places where cars stopped temporarily at night. The remaining path led deep into sparsely traveled land with virtually no street lighting. Terrain analysis showed the shoe discovery point was near one of these 3 entry points, an area often used to cross open land toward the Rio Grande. This was an isolated location, easily accessible by vehicle but difficult on foot, further making the hypothesis of Ethan being brought there by vehicle more reasonable. At the same time, police cross-referenced with Adrian's statement, the only one mentioning seeing a red vehicle parked near the parking lot area, to assess the evidence value. Though Adrian's statement lacked detail to identify the vehicle type, it still helped highlight the factor of a vehicle present near the time Ethan left the hall. After completing the analysis, the investigative team prepared an internal report recommending a shift in focus from the hypothesis of voluntary disappearance or getting lost to transported by vehicle, possible coercion, or abduction. This was the first time the case's nature was assessed at a higher level of severity, based on the connection between time, location, and evidence, a major turning point in the investigation process. When the hypothesis of Ethan being transported by vehicle became the central investigative direction, the team returned to cross-reference all the friends' statements with camera data, plausible routes, and established timelines. The goal was to identify anomalies, discrepancies, or gaps in the initial statements that had previously gone unnoticed. They began with Cole Ramirez's statement, in which he claimed he left the hall at 9:35 p.m. to wait for a ride. However, convenience store camera data showed a group of 3 young men standing near the parking lot until at least 9:42 p.m., and although the image was not clear enough to identify faces, the build and clothing of one of the 3 closely matched to the description of Cole recorded during his interview. An investigator analyzing the frames suggested that if Cole was actually present until near 9:42 p.m., his claim of leaving the hall nearly 10 minutes earlier was inaccurate. This discrepancy did not automatically incriminate Cole, but it prompted police to consider whether he might have deliberately obscured the timeline related to Ethan's disappearance. Next was Ryan Delgado. Ryan stated he left the hall at 9:45 p.m. after the final dance, consistent with a few others' accounts, but the camera near the youth hall did not capture any figure matching Ryan between 9:43 and 9:50 p.m. This drew attention because the distance between the hall exit and the camera was about 40 meters, almost certain to capture someone passing by. Instead, the camera recorded 3 figures standing still in the parking lot, unmoving for more than 5 minutes. Investigators questioned whether Ryan had stayed with the group longer than stated, or whether someone else appeared who was not mentioned. Adrian Cruz's statement was the most vague of all. Adrian said he was only incidentally near the parking lot area, saw Ethan walk past, but was unclear on which direction he went. However, when cross-referenced with the gas station camera, which captured a flash of light reflecting off an object resembling a phone held up in the parking lot, investigators suspected Adrian might have been using his phone or recording video at that moment. If so, Adrian's phone could contain location data or even photos, videos related to events before Ethan's disappearance. Police noted this factor for a potential future phone search warrant if needed. When the investigative group compiled all three statements with the camera data, they identified 3 points of contradiction. First, the departure times of Cole and Ryan did not match the movement times recorded on camera. Second, all three described different numbers of people in the parking lot, while the camera showed only a few people, consistent with the post-event atmosphere. And third, all three avoided mentioning anyone approaching Ethan, even though the camera captured movement of a figure standing quite close to where Ethan stepped down from the steps. Investigators raised the concern that one, or all three, might not be telling the full truth about the final minutes at the youth hall. While reviewing personal records, police discovered that Cole had an uncle who owned a 1965 Chevrolet Impala in dark red, closely matching the description of the vehicle that appeared in the parking lot on the night Ethan vanished. This vehicle was usually parked at the uncle's house, about 4 blocks from the youth hall, and Cole was occasionally allowed to borrow it for school or outings. When asked about this detail in a second interview, Cole reacted awkwardly and insisted he had not used his uncle's car that night and did not think the vehicle near the youth hall was related to his family. However, Cole's response did not reassure the investigative team because no one could confirm that the uncle had used the car on the evening of October 14th. Police contacted the uncle, but he said he did not clearly remember where the car was at that time, only noting that the keys were hanging in the garage and anyone in the family could access them. This raised the possibility that Cole or someone in the friend group had access to the vehicle, becoming a direction requiring deeper checking. During statement cross-referencing, police also noted that all group members described Ethan leaving the hall in a normal state, but the time windows they provided ranged from 9:30 to 9:45 p.m., an excessively large variation for an event as clearly remembered as the end of the dance. Investigators believed the time discrepancies could be due to inaccurate memory, but there was also the possibility that some in the group deliberately adjusted their statements to conceal some interaction with Ethan right before he disappeared. Police continued reviewing the circle of relationships to determine whether there were conflicts, misunderstandings, or motives within the friend group related to Ethan. Initial results showed no clear conflicts, but Cole's avoidance of discussing his departure time, Ryan's mismatch with camera data, and Adrian's lack of detailed positioning information prevented the investigative team from ruling out that they knew more than they had stated. After compiling all the data, the investigative team decided to temporarily place all three, Cole Ramirez, Ryan Delgado, and Adrian Cruz, on the persons of interest list, meaning a group requiring continued monitoring and information cross-checking in subsequent steps. Placing the friend group under scrutiny did not mean they were suspects, but it allowed police to request additional information, confront inconsistent statements, and examine access to vehicles, particularly the dark red Impala, to determine whether there was any connection to the route leading to where Ethan's shoe was found. After the friend group was placed on the persons of interest list and cross-referencing their statements revealed multiple mismatched timelines, the investigative team was forced to expand the search area to determine whether any other evidence could help reconstruct Ethan's movements after leaving the youth hall. On October 18th, a large-scale search operation was officially launched, mobilizing K-9 units, helicopter support from the Bernalillo County Air Unit, rescue teams, and more than 30 local volunteers. This large scale reflected the seriousness of the disappearance and the importance of gathering any additional useful traces before time and environmental conditions erased scene indicators. The starting point of the campaign remained the desert area where the left shoe was found, but the range was expanded in a fan shape, covering areas adjacent to the Rio Grande, lowlands to the west, small trails leading to the brush strip along the desert edge, and even seasonal dry washes that often held water. Police chose a grid search tactic, dividing teams into multiple groups, each responsible for a defined radius area to avoid overlap or omissions. K-9 units were deployed to the most inaccessible areas, where yucca and sagebrush formed dense patches that could retain scent traces or small discarded items. However, The dry climate and strong winds characteristic of New Mexico significantly reduced the canine scent detection capability. In the days following Ethan's disappearance, continuous strong winds limited scent retention on the soil surface. Nevertheless, the canine teams still swept each strip of land downwind to ensure no potential scent holding or drag points were missed. At the same time, helicopters flew low along the Rio Grande to search for disturbed soil areas, tire tracks, or any unusual objects floating on the water surface. Pilots reported several riverside areas with fresh vehicle tracks, but when ground teams approached, they turned out to be from fishermen or frequent off-road vehicles. No signs specifically related to Ethan were found. Within the desert range, search teams checked mounds, small trails created by locals or animals. The terrain features in this area made the search significantly difficult. Dry ground that easily erased footprints, consecutive low hills that fragmented visibility, and thick brush that could hide small evidence, like phones, clothing, or personal items. One volunteer group found a few small plastic fragments, but after comparison, they were unrelated household trash. In another area, search teams found fairly clear tire tracks, but analysis showed they were old, created days earlier, and did not match Ethan's disappearance timeline. Scrutiny of the dry washes was also conducted carefully. These washes had the potential to retain evidence due to water flow or deliberate disposal, especially at night when the area saw little traffic. However, throughout the entire sweep, investigators found no items matching Ethan. Soft soil sections near the washes were probed with rods and metal detectors to guard against evidence buried in shallow layers. Still, no new leads emerged. While searching along the Rio Grande, investigators paid attention to lesser-known gathering spots where trucks or large displacement vehicles could stop undetected. These areas were often frequented by fishermen, hunters, or campers. However, the lack of traces, torn fabric, personal items, or any abnormal signs led police to suspect that if Ethan had been brought through this area, the perpetrator may have been extremely careful not to leave evidence. On off-road trails, investigators searched for drag marks or disturbed soil. However, the dry, hard ground made such traces almost impossible to preserve durably. Aerial search efforts attempted to identify surface changes or brightness variations to spot suspicious points, but the obtained imagery showed no clear anomalies. Meanwhile, volunteer groups continued expanding the search radius southward, where the terrain opened into small valleys and low brush areas. They meticulously checked every patch of ground, rock crevice, and water gully, but all yielded no results. By the fourth day of the expanded campaign, no body, no clothing, and no personal items belonging to Ethan had been found beyond the shoe. This led investigators to assess that the shoe might be the only evidence dropped or left behind during movement, while any other items, if they existed, may have been taken by whoever transported Ethan or disposed of farther outside the search range. At the conclusion of the large-scale search phase, police determined there was no indication of a secondary crime scene, no evidence that Ethan had stopped or been held at any point in the searched area. This reinforced the hypothesis that the shoe was not a sign of Ethan moving on his own, but rather the result of a situation occurring inside a vehicle or during controlled movement. The absence of additional evidence also confronted investigators with a major impasse. They had one single piece, the shoe, but no supporting chain to determine the next direction. Nevertheless, the search campaign remained foundational for investigators to assess that the shoe discovery area was merely transitional, not the endpoint of Ethan's journey. After many weeks of large-scale searching yielded no additional evidence or traces beyond the left shoe, the investigative force entered a phase of overall case file evaluation to determine the next steps. By early 2007, after nearly 3 months of reviewing all possible information sources, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office officially completed the first-year comprehensive investigation report, a document hundreds of pages thick that included all statements, search results, camera data, route analyses, and professional assessments related to Ethan Rios's disappearance. The report clearly noted that no confirmed crime scene existed in any searched area, including the shoe discovery site. There were no signs of struggle, blood, abandoned vehicles, secondary evidence, or any anomalies except the solitary shoe, which could not precisely indicate the sequence of events or location of the incident. Investigators also reanalyzed the friend's statements, but despite minor discrepancies in departure times from the hall, there was no physical evidence or independent witness strong enough to elevate their status to official suspects. They remained only persons of interest, meaning individuals relevant for information, but without sufficient legal basis for coercive measures or deeper investigation. The fact that the dark red Impala could be accessed by Cole was also noted in the report, but because no camera clearly captured a license plate, no witness confirmed the vehicle leaving the youth hall with Ethan, and no physical traces were found on any vehicle, police could not determine if that vehicle was directly linked to the disappearance. Another major difficulty highlighted in the report was the lack of traces showing which direction Ethan moved after leaving the youth hall. All main routes recorded no appearance of Ethan on camera, and the secondary roads, leading into the desert, were too vast and lacked sufficient surveillance to reconstruct his path. This prevented investigators from identifying the primary crime scene, the most critical element in solving a missing person case. Additionally, resident reports about the dark red vehicle, while temporally consistent, remained indirect information, unverifiable independently, and lacked sufficiently clear descriptions to narrow the investigation. Investigators checked dozens of red vehicles in the area, but none produced noteworthy results. Mobile phone data collection in 2006 was also limited because technology at the time did not commonly store precise cell site location tracking, preventing police from reconstructing individuals' movements during the critical time window. Furthermore, no one reported seeing Ethan after he left the hall, and there were no leads about him leaving the state, using public transportation, or contacting anyone in his final hours. This left authorities unable to determine whether the case involved voluntary runaway, accidental mishap, or deliberate crime. Ultimately, after reviewing all facts in aggregate, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office concluded that they had exhausted every exploitable lead under the conditions of the time. While the left shoe continued to be regarded as the most important evidence, the absence of any supporting proof prevented it from leading to the next investigative step. With no identified crime scene, no clear suspect, and no chain of evidence, Ethan Rios's missing person file officially entered a stalled status. By mid-2007, the file was transferred to the Bernalillo County Cold Case Unit, which handled cases with no active leads. The Ethan Rios case was classified as an active cold case, meaning the file remained open but would not receive proactive investigation until new information emerged or improved investigative technology allowed reanalysis of evidence. Although Ethan's family continued to contact them periodically for updates, official reports noted that at that time, no further information could advance the investigation. After more than a year of effort involving over 7 supporting units, Ethan's disappearance temporarily closed without resolution. From 2007 to 2015, Ethan Rios's missing person file sat dormant in the cold case unit's cabinets, only reviewed on a 6-month cycle or when the family inquired, but with no substantial progress. Each time the file was reopened, investigators followed the same procedure, reviewing initial statements, examining the sole evidence, the left shoe, cross-checking camera data, and re-evaluating all plausible routes. However, with no new data, every review ended at the same impasse as in 2007. The major limitations of the initial investigation, considered normal in the 2006 context, became glaring weaknesses when the cold case unit reassessed by later investigative standards. One of the biggest shortcomings was the lack of cell data analysis. At the time of Ethan's disappearance, mobile phone location data analysis was very limited and almost never performed in missing teen cases unless there was clear abduction suspicion. Phone records for Ethan and his friends were only checked at a basic level, verifying whether texts were sent or received around the disappearance time, but full cell site location data, which could show each person's direction of travel or confirm which phone left the youth hall area right after 9:40 p.m., was not collected. This absence severely restricted timeline route analysis, and when the cold case unit later checked, they could not recover it because carriers no longer retained cell site data after many years. Another weakness was the overly narrow scope of route analysis relative to South Valley's terrain. The initial investigation focused almost entirely on Ethan's usual walking route home, and the desert area where the left shoe was found. But the land southwest of Albuquerque had dozens of small trails leading into the desert and remote areas accessible by truck or off-road vehicle. Many of these were not fully checked in 2006 because investigators prioritized higher probability locations based on typical teen behavior. The cold case unit noted that not expanding the search range earlier into deeper Rio Grande valleys or farther western open lands may have missed opportunities to find additional evidence if it existed. Additionally, no new witnesses emerged over nearly a decade. People present at the youth hall dance had graduated, moved away, or no longer remembered details, clearly due to the passage of time. Re-interviews in 2010 and 2013 produced similar results. No one had additional information, and no one recalled anything suspicious beyond their original statements. This made the already sparse witness information source increasingly faint. A major disappointment for the cold case unit was the failure to locate the dark red Chevy Impala mentioned in initial statements. In 2007, police only checked the uncle's car and a few red vehicles near the youth hall. But from 2008 onward, the vehicle could have changed owners, been retitled, or dismantled. When the cold case unit attempted a recheck in 2012 by requesting a list of 1964, 1966 Impalas across Bernalillo County, the results showed more than 40 vehicles, most sold out of state or no longer existing. The complexity of tracing an old vehicle through multiple owners made checking the Impala, one of the most promising leads, nearly impossible. Another missed opportunity was the failure to collect the friend's phone data in a manner consistent with modern investigative standards. If 2006 police had fully retrieved on off times, cell tower pings, or missed calls for Cole, Ryan, and Adrian, their locations from 9:30–10:30 p.m. might have revealed critical anomalies. But because that data was not collected at a high technical level, the cold case unit could not recover it later. Moreover, in 2006, there were no digital investigative measures such as phone content extraction, app analysis, or location history review. When the file was reviewed years later, modern technology could not fill the initial data gaps. Another notable point recorded by the cold case unit in their 2015 report was the lack of linkage between the shoe discovery area and the network of roads leading to western valleys. At the time of Ethan's disappearance, investigators did not create a detailed map of all desert entry points or assess the feasibility of each if a vehicle carrying Ethan moved on the night of October 14. This left the shoe, the only evidence, without a sufficiently broad terrain context to infer vehicle movement direction or stopping location. The cold case unit concluded that, absent additional evidence, new witnesses, or supplementary technical data, the file could not advance further. Although they reviewed it at least 8 times between 2007 and 2015, each review returned to the same conclusion: no continuous chain of evidence, no clear suspect, and no new facts to exploit. As a result, Ethan's disappearance remained in a frozen state, becoming one of Bernalillo County's most challenging files and a textbook example of missed opportunities in the early days when traces were fresh and investigative technology was limited. By early 2016, when Ethan Rios's missing person file had lain dormant for nearly a decade in the cold case unit with no new directions, an unexpected event occurred in the Jemez Mountains, more than 70 miles northwest of South Valley. In April of that year, a hiker trekking along a trail near the Jemez Hot Springs area discovered a white bone object protruding from the soil after several days of heavy rain. Initially thinking it was animal bone, upon closer inspection he realized the leg and hip bone structures resembled human bones. He immediately reported it to the Sandoval County Sheriff's Office, the agency responsible for the Jemez Mountains area. The scene response team took nearly 2 hours to reach the location, a remote spot far from the main road, requiring more than a mile of hiking over steep terrain, sparse forest, and rock clusters. Upon arrival, they confirmed it was human remains, including the pelvis, part of the spine, femur, and numerous small bone fragments scattered around the area. No intact clothing was present, but there were a few faded gray-silver fabric scraps and a detached shoe sole fragment. Due to extensive long-term decomposition, the The cause of death could not be determined at the scene. All remains were collected, mapped according to the scene diagram, and transferred to the New Mexico State Forensic Lab for analysis. The Bernalillo County Cold Case Unit was notified because the discovery site, while quite far from South Valley, was still within a region potentially linked to past missing persons cases. When forensics began examination, they immediately recognized the skeletal age as belonging to a teenager approximately 14-17 years old at the time of death. The bone structure indicated the victim was in the late stages of adolescent development. This prompted forensic specialists to cross-reference with open missing persons files in New Mexico over the past 15 years, including Ethan Rios's case. Since soft tissue had completely decomposed, identification primarily relied on dental records. Fortunately, Ethan's family had provided dental records to police back in 2006, enabling a quick comparison. After collecting the jawbone and teeth from the discovery site, forensic odontologists compared each feature, fillings, incisor alignment, root shapes, and a partially erupted wisdom tooth. Results within the following week confirmed the remains belonged to Ethan Rios, missing since October 2006. Once the notification reached the cold case unit and then Ethan's family, the case officially ceased being a missing person file and was reclassified as a death investigation, highly likely a homicide due to the body's remote discovery location. The preliminary forensic report also indicated the time of death aligned with Ethan's disappearance period, late 2006. Based on bone decomposition levels and the characteristic Jemez Mountains environment, cold winters, dry summers, forensics estimated the body had lain there for a very long time, likely from the same period Ethan vanished. This ruled out any possibility that Ethan survived after leaving South Valley and confirmed his death occurred in the early days of his disappearance. Additionally, the body's appearance in such a remote area as Jemez raised a critical issue. No road allowed Ethan to walk or take a bus to this location on his own. The remains site was far from major roads, accessible only by personal or off-road vehicle, followed by a further hike through forest. This completely eliminated the possibility of voluntary departure from South Valley. A gray fabric scrap found near the bones was sent for material analysis. Results showed the fabric closely matched the description of the shirt Ethan wore the night he left the youth hall, though the color had faded significantly after prolonged environmental exposure. Furthermore, mechanical marks on some long bones suggested the body may have been dragged or subjected to force before decomposition. These findings could not conclude a specific cause of death, but allowed confirmation that this was not natural death or a walking accident. After Ethan's identity was confirmed, the nature of the case completely changed. The file shifted from missing person to unsolved homicide investigation, and the cold case unit officially took over from Sandoval County for inter-county coordination. For the first time since 2006, authorities had a specific and significant lead, not only explaining Ethan's fate, but also providing a new geographic anchor, raising questions about why the body was in the Jemez Mountains, a remote area unrelated to Ethan's daily life or routine travel. This discovery created a major turning point, while simultaneously posing a series of new questions, forcing investigators to re-examine the entire old file from a completely different perspective. The discovery of Ethan's body in the Jemez Mountains in 2016 forced the cold case unit to re-examine the entire file from a technical standpoint, especially in the context of mobile phone data analysis and cell site location technology having advanced far beyond 2006 levels. Previously, collected phone data was only at a basic level, mainly including call logs and text messages, but without detailed records of which cell towers each device had connected to. However, thanks to expanded carrier storage infrastructure and the ability to retrieve raw data, the cold case unit obtained court orders to recover all relevant information tied to the phone numbers in the original file, including those of Ethan, Cole Ramirez, Ryan Delgado, and Adrian Cruz. Cell site analysis technicians created maps of signals captured from each device during the time frame of 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. on the night Ethan disappeared. Although the old data was not as complete as current standards, several key pings could still be reconstructed. When analyzing Ethan's phone signals, technicians confirmed the device completely lost connection after 9:42 p.m., matching the time he was last seen leaving the hall. This data aligned with the family's information that they could not reach Ethan after 10 p.m. However, the most significant finding came from analyzing Cole Ramirez's device. In the initial file, Cole claimed he stayed near home that night and did not leave South Valley, but reconstructed 2006 cell site data showed something entirely different. Cole's phone connected to a tower along US 550 around 10:18 p.m., just 40 minutes after Ethan was last seen. 550 is the main route from Albuquerque into the Jemez Mountains, and this tower was more than 25 miles from the youth hall, outside any of Cole's usual activity routes. The analysis team continued cross-verification to confirm the accuracy of this ping. They reviewed 2006 coverage maps, signal interference, and tower radius. Results confirmed that Cole's device could not have picked up a signal from his home location. The US 550 tower could only connect if the phone was actually within the coverage area along the route toward Jemez. This data created a serious contradiction with Cole's statement and became the first technical evidence indicating he was on a route directly related to where Ethan's body was later found. The team also cross-checked cell site data from Ryan's and Adrian's phones, but their data did not leave South Valley that night or was too fragmented to draw conclusions. Although it could not yet be determined whether all three traveled together or used the same vehicle, the information on Cole was critical because it showed his personal movement in the direction leading to the body discovery site. In addition, the cold case unit began re-examining the vehicle factor, one that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. In 2016, they requested DMV history copies for all vehicles owned by the Ramirez family and those living at the same address. Results showed the 1965 dark red Chevy Impala remained in the uncle's records, and crucially, in 2006, Cole had been issued temporary permission to use the vehicle on certain occasions, including weekends and after-school activities. DMV data also showed the vehicle had been recorded traveling on a road near Rio Rancho in 2006, where a branch directly connected to US 550. This did not confirm the vehicle's presence in Jemez on the night Ethan disappeared, but it aligned with the cell site ping indicating Cole moved in that direction during the critical time window. The match between Cole's travel direction, vehicle characteristics, and the route to the body discovery site led the cold case unit to view this as the first clear technical linkage between the 2006 file and the 2016 discovery evidence. A technical map was created, marking the presumed route Cole may have taken, leaving South Valley after 9:40 p.m., traveling up Coors Boulevard, then merging onto US 550, before heading deep into the Jemez Range. This path matched the timeline, distance, and terrain features. The investigative team compiled all cell site data, DMV information, and the coincidence of the vehicle mentioned in initial statements to build the first set of technical evidence capable of reopening the case. This was the most significant breakthrough since Ethan's disappearance, the first time allowing the cold case unit to reconsider the possibility that one of the people present on the night Ethan vanished had traveled directly to where his body was later found. After the Technical Analysis Division completed the cell site report and confirmed that Cole Ramirez's phone had appeared on US 550 during the window matching Ethan's disappearance, the cold case unit decided to recall Cole, Ryan Delgado, and Adrian Cruz for additional statements. This was the first time in nearly 10 years that all three were required to cooperate as key witnesses in a file now reclassified as a homicide investigation. The summonses were conducted individually to prevent them from aligning their accounts. Cole was called first. When confronted with the cell site data, Cole appeared surprised and denied that his phone had been on US 550 on the night of October 14, 2006. He insisted he had been home after 9:30 p.m. and did not leave South Valley all night. However, when investigators presented the map showing the tower his phone connected to at 10:18 p.m., he began offering a completely new explanation differing from his 2006 statement that he might have lent his phone to a friend that night or accidentally dropped it somewhere. This prompted investigators to ask Cole to specify exactly who might have borrowed or picked up his phone at that time, but Cole could not name anyone specific. This new statement directly contradicted his original one, in which Cole said he kept the phone in his pocket all evening and had even checked the time on it right before leaving the hall. This contradiction removed him from neutral witness status. When asked about his uncle's dark red Chevy Impala, Cole again changed details. Instead of insisting he did not use the car that night as stated in 2006, he said he wasn't sure if he had borrowed it to go anywhere. Combined with the cell site data showing movement consistent with the route to the Jemez Mountains, investigators noted signs that Cole was concealing information. Next called was Ryan Delgado. Ryan had previously stated that after leaving the hall around 9:45 p.m., he walked home and did not see Ethan again. However, when asked to reconstruct the detailed timeline of that night, Ryan repeatedly changed his descriptions. At times, he said he left the hall earlier, at times later, and could not specify whether he stayed in the parking lot for a long period or just passed through. When asked if he saw Cole leave or stand with anyone else, he replied he didn't remember exactly because it was too long ago. But investigators noted anomalies. When cross-referenced with 2006 camera data, Ryan could not match his claimed departure time to any frame. This not only questioned memory accuracy, but also suggested Ryan was avoiding mentioning a key part of information related to the group's movements. When investigators asked if Ryan had ever gone up towards US 550 at any point that night, his reaction was noted as a pronounced hesitation, after which he answered that he didn't have a car, so couldn't have gone up there, though he did not deny the possibility of riding with someone else. This made Ryan a subject requiring closer monitoring. The last in the group was Adrian Cruz, whose prior statements had been inconsistent but not overly contradictory. However, when confronted with information about the body found in Jemez and the cell site analysis of Cole's travel direction, Adrian chose evasion. When asked if he knew anyone in the group who drove up that way on the night Ethan disappeared, Adrian said he did not recall anyone mentioning plans to leave South Valley. When investigators presented the cell site data and asked if Adrian had been in the Chevy Impala that night, he responded circuitously, saying he didn't think it had anything to do with Uncle Cole's car and didn't clearly remember who went with whom. This differed from his first statement, in which Adrian had described in detail seeing a red car parked near the youth hall parking lot, but at that time claimed he wasn't sure whose it was. Investigators recognized that Adrian's evasion was not due to faded memory over time, but showed signs of deliberately avoiding sensitive information. When asked to reconstruct his exact position in the parking lot from 9:35 p.m. to 9:45 p.m., Adrian could not provide a consistent answer. At times, he said he stood near the east fence, at times near the hall entrance. The inability to reconstruct this timeline led investigators to suspect Adrian may have witnessed more than he revealed. After completing the 3 separate sessions, the cold case unit compiled the data and identified a series of anomalies. Cole offered an entirely new statement, contradicting his old one. Ryan could not recreate a timeline and avoided vehicle-related information. Adrian did not answer key questions directly, despite previously mentioning the red car. Additionally, Cole's cell site timing matched the route to the body discovery site, an element none in the group could reasonably explain. From the major and minor contradictions in statements, inconsistencies with technical data, and the clear evasion by all three, the cold case unit officially determined that the friend group, previously only persons of interest, was now the primary suspect group in the case. This was the first time since 2006 that the investigation had a clear focus on a specific group of individuals based on compiled technical evidence, travel data, and abnormal statement behavior. After collecting all cell site data, the conflicting statements from the suspect group, and forensic information from the remains discovery area, the cold case unit began the process of reconstructing the crime journey with the goal of identifying the route, travel timing, and possible stopping points directly related to Ethan Rios's death. The first step for the investigative team was to reconstruct the route, starting from South Valley Community Youth Hall, where Ethan was last seen, extending north via Coors BLVD, merging onto NM 45, then connecting to US 550, the main artery leading to the Jemez Mountains. Investigators used 2006 mobile tower data, cross-referenced with telecommunications infrastructure maps from that period, to pinpoint exactly which towers Cole's phone connected to from 9:52 p.m. to 11:04 p.m. Based on this data, the cold case unit determined Cole's device left the South Valley area around 10:02 p.m., appeared near the Coors Paseo intersection within 5 minutes after that, then connected continuously to a chain of towers along US 550, indicating travel speed consistent with an older sedan like the Chevy Impala. Meanwhile, Cole's prior statement was that he was completely home from 9:30 p.m., and Ryan claimed he did not see Cole after leaving the hall. The overlap of inconsistent timelines forced investigators to reconstruct each minute of the presumed journey to see if the suspect group could have picked up Ethan, left South Valley, and reached the Jemez area in realistic time. After analysis, investigators established a timeline. If Ethan left the hall at 9:40 p.m. and was approached immediately in the parking lot, the suspect group could have departed no later than 9:50 p.m. Average travel time from South Valley to the Jemez Remains discovery area ranged from 1 hour 5 minutes to 1 hour 15 minutes, depending on nighttime traffic conditions. Cole's cell site ping at 11:04 p.m. captured a signal at the base of the Jemez Mountains, showing the journey fit precisely, opening the possibility of a scenario in which the three suspects took Ethan by vehicle and stopped in a remote area to commit the crime. Investigators continued expanding the analysis by mapping all towers Cole's device connected to between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. using 2006-era coverage radius simulation software to narrow suspect areas where the Impala may have stopped. Results identified 3 plausible points, one on the shoulder of US 558 miles from San Ysidro, one at the intersection of a dirt trail leading into the Jemez forest, and one near an unofficial parking area used by hikers. A field investigation team was sent to the remains discovery area to cross-check against the 3 modeled points. They swept with metal detectors, ground-penetrating scanners, and observed erosion patterns to check for surviving old traces. Unexpectedly, under dry soil and decayed grass, about 42 meters from the remains location, they found 2 weathered pieces of evidence, a gray nylon fragment rotted at the edges, and a section of industrial fiber tape deformed, but still retaining synthetic fiber structure. The size and type of tape were compatible with a portion of tape noted in the 2016 forensic report during Ethan's remains examination. At that time, experts had found tape residue wrapped around the lower jawbone, though the evidence was no longer intact. The presence of nylon and tape at a site not far from the bones increased the likelihood this was where the suspect group stopped the vehicle to restrain Ethan. Investigators noted the terrain layout, a recessed patch beside the forest edge, large enough for an Impala to park unseen from the main road, with faint old soil compression marks still discernible under laser light. When comparing the simulated route with on-site survey results, the cold case unit realized this stop point matched the final tower Cole's phone connected to at 11:04 p.m. This increased the reliability of the hypothesis that Cole, along with Ryan and Adrian, had been present in the area during the window. Ethan was believed to have died. Next, investigators reconstructed the Impala's movement based on average vehicle speed and fuel consumption to predict how long the suspect group may have remained at the scene. Cell site data showed that after 11:04 p.m., Cole's phone did not connect to any tower for more than 40 minutes, a condition only possible if the device was in a no-coverage area like the Jemez Mountain forest. This aligned with the assessment that the suspects turned off the phone, left it in the vehicle, or it accidentally entered a terrain depression. When the phone reappeared on the network at 11:47 p.m., it connected to a tower near San Ysidro, matching the return route to South Valley. Combining the 3 data points, Ethan's disappearance time, remains discovery location, and Cole's device journey, created the first logically consistent and tightly linked reconstruction of the case since 2006. These results were further strengthened when a special search team found the remaining nylon fragment still containing synthetic fibers matching the material of industrial tool bags, a product type that Cole's uncle had used at his Bernalillo garage, consistent with DMV records showing Cole borrowed the Impala in 2006. Although the evidence was too weathered for DNA identification, the structural characteristics and decomposition level indicated the nylon and tape had been at that location for over a decade, matching Ethan's disappearance timeframe. The crime journey reconstruction thus became a critical investigative foundation. It not only identified the highest probability route and stop point, but also created a specific time frame, dismantling the entire statements of Cole, Ryan, and Adrian. From here, the case was no longer speculative, but had a clear structure of technical evidence, directly guiding the investigation into the phase of pursuing each suspect's criminal conduct. Adrian was recalled just 3 days after the cold case unit completed the crime journey reconstruction and discovered evidence at the Jemez site. This time, the interrogation was no longer a general information gathering session as before. The entire questioning session was designed around 3 key inconsistencies: cell site data showing Cole's phone present on US 550 during the window of Ethan's disappearance, Ryan's statement about his departure time from the youth hall not matching camera footage, and Adrian's previously stated timeline that could not align at all with the route leading to the remains discovery site. Investigators began by presenting the technical report, showing Adrian the reconstructed movement map from cell site data, then directly cross-referencing it with the location where the skeleton was found. Adrian's prolonged silence in the first few minutes led the investigative team to determine he had been completely shaken by the new volume of information. Investigators continued by describing in detail the discovery of the nylon and tape, evidence matching descriptions in the 2016 forensic file, and asked why these items appeared exactly in the remains area. When pressed to explain why Cole's phone appeared continuously on US 550 while all 3 claimed they had gone home, Adrian began showing clear signs of stress, hands clasped together, eyes unable to hold a fixed gaze, and breathing becoming labored. Investigators immediately shifted tactics, stating that this was the final opportunity for Adrian to provide a truthful statement before the prosecutor decided on charging levels. This psychological blow caused Adrian to collapse completely. Just seconds later, he uttered the first sentence the investigative team had waited years for: "I can't keep this to myself anymore." From there, his statement began pouring out, initially halting, but gradually becoming more coherent as Adrian recounted the entire sequence of events on the night Ethan disappeared. According to Adrian, the conflict between Ethan and Cole started right in the youth hall parking lot area. Ethan left the hall early, but remained talking with another group of friends, and Cole believed Ethan was trying to get attention from Maya Solis, a jealousy issue that had existed for months prior. Ryan actively distanced himself from the situation because he did not want to get involved in the conflict, while Adrian, per his confession, only followed along thinking it would stop at verbal back and forth. However, the situation escalated when Cole approached, grabbed Ethan's shirt, and shoved him hard toward the dark red Chevy Impala parked at the edge of the lot. Ethan resisted, got caught on the car door, and slipped, causing his head to strike the metal frame next to the door. Adrian stated he was not sure how hard the impact was, but saw Ethan dazed and unable to stand steadily. While Ethan was disoriented, Cole and Ryan pulled him into the back seat. Adrian initially refused to get in the car, but Cole shouted that no one is leaving, forcing Adrian to sit in the front passenger seat. As the car left the parking lot, Ethan was still moving slightly, trying to sit up but being pushed back down by Cole, who yelled at him to be quiet. Adrian's statement fully matched the investigative team's assessment that Ethan did not die in South Valley, but perished during transport. On the road heading north, Cole shifted from anger to panic when Ethan stopped moving. Adrian recounted that Cole repeatedly checked the rearview mirror and yelled that he's not breathing anymore, while Ryan in the back tried shaking Ethan. None of the 3 knew what to do, and Cole, in a state of panic, decided to get as far from South Valley as possible, driving straight up US 550 because that was the place least likely to be seen by anyone they knew. This statement precisely matched the reconstructed cell site route reinforcing the value of the technical evidence. When the car reached the Jemez Mountains area, Cole turned onto a dirt road leading into the forest, exactly the location investigators had identified as the most plausible stop point. Adrian stated that there, Cole opened the trunk and retrieved a roll of gray tape and a nylon sheet that were items from his uncle's garage. Ethan was dragged out onto the ground, showing no response. Ryan held Ethan's arms while Cole wrapped tape around his wrists and lower jaw to make it look like he ran away. Adrian said he stood back, not daring to look directly, but still hearing the sound of tape tearing, footsteps moving, and Cole ordering cleanup of traces. When asked whether Ethan was still alive or already deceased at that point, Adrian only replied that he wasn't moving anymore, and I didn't hear breathing, a description consistent with the forensic conclusion that Ethan died on the night he was taken. After placing the body in the recessed area beside the forest, Cole pulled the nylon sheet over the upper body, then told the group to return to the car. Ryan was trembling, and Adrian said he only went along because I was afraid Cole would do something to me. As they left the scene, Cole turned off the phone and found his way back to US 550, then drove straight back to South Valley in silence. This statement aligned with the period when the device lost signal and the time it reconnected near San Isidro. When investigators asked Adrian to confirm each detail, he did not deny any point in the technical reconstruction. Instead, he added many small details, such as the car's parking position, headlight reflections on rock walls, and even Ryan arguing with Cole on the return drive. All matched the Jemez terrain and travel timing. With this confession, the investigative team obtained for the first time a complete statement fully consistent with evidence and technical sequence, turning Adrian into a key incriminating witness and placing the friend group in the position of indisputable primary suspects. Immediately after Adrian's confession was documented and fully cross-referenced with all technical evidence collected during the reinvestigation phase, the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office began compiling the prosecution file against Cole Ramirez, the suspect viewed as the primary driver of the criminal events on the night Ethan disappeared. The prosecution team organized evidence into three main axes. 1. Reconstructed cell site data of the South Valley US 550 Jemez journey fully matching Adrian's statement. 2. Nylon and tape evidence recovered at the scene consistent with Adrian's description of Cole's actions while handling the body. 3. Adrian's confession detailing the coercion of Ethan into the vehicle, the altercation in the parking lot, the transport to Jemez, and subsequent cover-up actions. Because the charge of kidnapping resulting in death required proof of initial coercion and the resulting death occurring during commission of the crime, prosecutors had to establish both elements through technical evidence and testimony. Based on forensic analyses, phone data, and Adrian's statement, the prosecution concluded that Ethan was unconscious or near unconscious right from the youth hall parking lot due to the hard impact against the Impala doorframe, and that being taken against his will, combined with being left in potentially lethal conditions, sufficiently constituted the kidnapping element under New Mexico state law. A nearly 3-hour presentation before the grand jury was held in Albuquerque in early March 2018. There, prosecutors sequentially presented each evidence group, the cell site reconstructed movement diagram, satellite images of the remains discovery site, forensic reports, photos of the decomposed nylon evidence, DMV location reports related to Cole borrowing the Impala in 2006, and finally, the transcript of Adrian's confession. Prosecutors particularly emphasized the no-signal period of Cole's phone in the Jemez area, precisely matching the time frame Adrian described when the group stopped the car to remove Ethan's body to the forest area. Grand jurors were not permitted to hear defense arguments, only to evaluate the validity and strength of evidence to decide whether to approve the indictment. When prosecutors presented the timeline model from leaving the youth hall at 9:40 p.m. to the cell site reconnection at 11:47 p.m., a detailed Jemez scene map was displayed, highlighting the recessed ground where evidence was found. This created a strong correspondence between the statement and objective data, leading the grand jury to assess that Cole's conduct was not merely participation but active leadership of the chain of events. Adrian's testimony, though from a participating witness, was deemed credible because its entire content aligned with independent physical and technical evidence. Prosecutors affirmed that the coercive act of placing Ethan in the vehicle and the events leading to death occurred within the same criminal sequence, meeting the standard for a kidnapping resulting in death indictment under state criminal code. After the final presentation, the grand jury voted in closed session and approved the indictment by an overwhelming majority. An arrest warrant for Cole Ramirez was issued the same day, along with search warrants for related vehicles and property. By that afternoon, a Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office execution team, coordinated with the Rio Rancho Police Department, conducted surveillance at Cole's current residence, a two-story apartment near unsolved. Cole was arrested without resistance when authorities intercepted his vehicle at the residential entrance. The report noted that Cole appeared unusually calm, only asking, "Is this about Ethan?" before being handcuffed. He was transported to county jail and informed of the kidnapping resulting in death charge, a felony carrying a potential life sentence under state law. Cole's arrest officially marked the biggest turning point in the case since 2006. For the first time, investigators had sufficient evidence to move the file from speculation to a complete, grand jury-approved prosecution process. The event quickly spread through the Rio Rancho and South Valley communities, but for the investigative force, this was only the beginning of a lengthy legal process preparing for the upcoming trial. The New Mexico State criminal trial of Cole Ramirez opened in late 2018 at the Bernalillo County District Court, drawing special public attention as prosecutors prepared to present a set of technical evidence rarely seen in a case that had gone cold for over a decade. From the opening statement, prosecutors focused on the structure of the file, the cell site reconstructed travel route, departure timelines from the youth hall, the no-signal period in the Jemez Mountains, nylon and tape evidence recovered near the remains discovery site, and Adrian's direct testimony describing the coercion of Ethan into the vehicle and transport to Jemez. Prosecutors displayed maps of South Valley and simulated the drive up US 550 using satellite imagery, calling the cell site expert to the stand to explain to the jury how Cole's device connected to towers on the night Ethan disappeared. The expert pointed out that those connections could not be coincidental, as Cole's phone moved through 3 coverage zones, perfectly matching the timing and speed of an older sedan traveling from Albuquerque to Jemez. Prosecutors continued by presenting the critical 11:04 p.m. timestamp when Cole's phone was last recorded at the base of the mountains before losing signal for nearly 40 minutes. This was described as the period when the suspect group stopped the car at the Forest Point, where evidence and remains were later found. Prosecutors also highlighted the match between Adrian's statement and objective data from the described parking position, the turnoff from US 550 to the no signal, feeling Adrian said they experienced when stopping deep in the woods. The jury viewed photos of the evidence, the partially decomposed gray nylon fragment, still retaining fiber structure, and the weather-deformed industrial fiber tape. Prosecutors called the forensic expert to the stand to affirm that this type of tape was consistent with material found around Ethan's lower jawbone during the 2016 remains excavation. The forensic report, though lacking much soft tissue evidence, was sufficient to prove the presence of similar material to the fragment recovered in the research. Next, to establish motive and behavioral sequence, prosecutors called Adrian as a witness. The courtroom fell silent as Adrian recounted the events of the night Ethan disappeared. Cole approaching Ethan in the parking lot, the fall causing Ethan to become dazed and defenseless, forcing him into the car, the group's panic when Ethan stopped responding, and the decision to take the body to Jemez to avoid detection. Prosecutors emphasized that Adrian's testimony was not mere confession, but a statement fully consistent point by point with independent objective evidence, which they called the greatest strength of the file. In the defense phase, defense counsel focused on attacking Adrian's credibility, questioning why he waited over 10 years to give a true statement, and suggesting Adrian was testifying only to reduce his own liability. Defense argued that a witness who participated in the crime could not be considered fully truthful when his statement might carry personal motive. Defense asked the court to consider the possibility that Ryan or Adrian was the leader, while Cole was merely present. However, prosecutors countered by pointing out that Adrian's testimony was not the sole evidence. Cell site reconstructed the precise route, weathered evidence matched the described location, and crucially, DMV data showed Cole was the only one authorized to use the Impala that night, ruling out Ryan as driver. The cell site expert was recalled for cross-examination. Defense argued that 2006 data was not precise enough to pinpoint exact locations, but the expert affirmed that while the technology could not locate to the meter, the continuous movement through towers along US 550 was irrefutable proof the device left Albuquerque and headed north. The expert clearly explained how the no-signal period in Jemez was entirely natural due to mountainous terrain splitting coverage zones, reinforcing Adrian's statement about stopping deep in the forest. Prosecutors also called the cold case investigator, who directly participated in route reconstruction, to testify. The investigator described the file recovery process, cross-referencing all 2006 statements, reviewing over 400 pages of old reports, rebuilding route maps, and discovering evidence at the scene. The jury heard details of how the team measured terrain to identify the recessed ground where suspects likely stopped the car. The investigator explained using travel time models to verify whether Adrian's statement matched reality, concluding it aligned completely with all cell site positioning, routes, and the determined time of death. In prosecutors' rebuttal, they focused on reinforcing the file's objectivity. No evidence relied solely on one person's testimony. Adrian's entire statement was corroborated by independent data, and the match between evidence, timing, and route was impossible to occur by chance. When evidence presentation concluded, the jury entered deliberation with what was evaluated as the most tightly structured file among cold cases reinvestigated in New Mexico during the 2010s decade. After 2 days of continuous deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom and delivered the final verdict for Cole Ramirez, guilty on the charge of kidnapping resulting in death, the highest charge level prosecutors had sought based on the entire chain of technical evidence and verified testimony. When the verdict was read, Cole maintained his expression, but the entire spectator gallery behind him fell into absolute silence. The case that had stretched over more than 12 years finally received a clear legal resolution. The trial then moved to the sentencing phase, during which the judge outlined aggravating and mitigating factors before determining the punishment. The judge emphasized that Cole played a central role throughout the entire sequence of events. Cole was the one who actively approached Ethan in the parking lot, forced Ethan into the vehicle, drove the Impala away from South Valley, and made the decision to take Ethan to Jemez, where he was left and died. The court recognized that although Ethan's death was not premeditated, the act of kidnapping against his will and abandoning the victim in lethal conditions fully constituted the elements of the charged offense. With this assessment, the judge sentenced Cole Ramirez to 35 years in prison, with a minimum of 28 years to be served before eligibility for parole consideration. This was one of the highest sentences imposed for this charge in New Mexico in the past decade, reflecting the severity and duration of the case. After sentencing Cole, the court proceeded to address Ryan Delgado's legal responsibility. Prosecutors did not charge Ryan with the same offense as Cole, due to insufficient evidence showing he actively led or controlled the situation, but based on Adrian's testimony and cell site analysis, the court determined Ryan participated in the coercion and assisted in placing Ethan in the vehicle. Ryan pleaded guilty to accessory to kidnapping resulting in death under a plea agreement, in exchange for a significantly lower sentence than Cole's. The judge imposed 7 years in prison, with 3 years potentially suspended if Ryan fully completed rehabilitation programs and continued cooperating in post-verdict evidence proceedings. Ryan's role was viewed as more passive than Cole's, but his presence and actions still contributed to enabling the crime, so the court affirmed this sentence was necessary to reflect his accountability in the matter. For Adrian Cruz, who provided the decisive testimony that broke the case after more than a decade of deadlock, the court recognized his cooperation at an essential level. Adrian's statement not only aligned with cell site data and physical evidence, but also enabled investigators to accurately reconstruct the journey on the night Ethan disappeared. Prosecutors recommended the maximum sentence reduction allowable under guidelines for a cooperating defendant, and the court approved, sentencing Adrian to 3 years of probation, along with a requirement to participate in long-term community supervision. The judge explained that although Adrian was present at the scene and did not prevent the crime, his full cooperation was the primary reason the case could be resolved. The suspended sentence reflected a clear distinction between Cole's and Ryan's active criminal conduct and Adrian's passive but seriously wrongful involvement. Once all 3 sentences were pronounced, the legal file for the Ethan Rios case, one of New Mexico's longest-running missing person turned homicide investigations, was officially closed in the judicial system. The sentences for Cole, Ryan, and Adrian were entered into state court records, concluding the prosecution and punishment phase. With this verdict, full criminal responsibility for Ethan's death was established, ending the long journey from the night Ethan left the youth hall in 2006 to the 2018 criminal trial. When the sentences for Cole, Ryan, and Adrian were handed down and the legal file officially closed, the New Mexico Cold Case Unit began an internal summary of the entire investigative journey that spanned more than 12 years. This was not merely an administrative procedure, but a critical step to evaluate the effectiveness of applied investigative techniques, identify early-stage shortcomings, and determine necessary professional improvements for similar future cases. Right from the start of the summary, the unit highlighted the case's profound impact on the state's entire backlog handling system, that a 2006 disappearance, with no confirmed crime scene, no independent witnesses, and virtually no initial physical evidence, could be solved in 2018, became important proof of the potential to re-evaluate seemingly dead-end cases when new technology combines with rigorous investigative process. The Cold Case Unit also noted that the 2016 discovery of remains in the Jemez Mountains was the key catalyst, but the decisive factor lay in how investigators leveraged technology that did not exist at the time of the crime, particularly expanded cell site analysis and real-time route modeling. In the summary, the unit identified the most critical investigative techniques that led to the breakthrough. First, reanalysis of 2006 cell site data using movement reconstruction algorithms, which enabled identification of the likely route the Impala traveled on the night Ethan disappeared. This was a major turning point because it not only proved Cole's phone was in the Jemez area at the relevant time, but also completely dismantled the friend group's earlier statements. Second was terrain analysis combined with field surveys, which pinpointed the suspect's probable stop based on mountain geography and coverage patterns. Without this step, the weathered nylon and tape evidence might never have been found. Third was cross-referencing old statements with time, distance evaluation techniques, proving that what Cole, Ryan, and Adrian claimed in 2006 could not possibly align with actual movement. Through this method, the investigative team turned minor inconsistencies into decisive leverage that left the suspects unable to deny involvement. The summary also candidly pointed out reasons the case remained unsolved for 12 years before resolution. First, 2006 technological limitations played a major role. At the time, authorities lacked the capability to extract and analyze phone location data at the resolution modern tools allow. This meant cell site data existed, but could not be utilized immediately. Next was the lack of initial physical leads, with no body, no blood traces, and no confirmed scene. The case was therefore classified as undetermined disappearance, severely narrowing the pursuit. Additionally, New Mexico's vast and complex terrain, especially the Jemez Range, made locating a body or traces nearly impossible without direct guidance. Another key factor was that Ethan's friend group went undetected for statement inconsistencies early on, partly due to the 2006 team's inexperience in analyzing information conflicts without supporting evidence, and partly due to the default assumption that a teen's disappearance was runaway or accident. Only when the Cold Case Unit applied new standard procedures, particularly mandatory cross-referencing of statements with technical data, did those contradictions emerge and become the foundation for breaking the case. In the final section of the report, the unit recorded a series of professional improvements implemented after the case. One of the most significant changes was integrating cell site analysis into all missing persons files from 2017 onward, regardless of whether the victim was located. New investigators now receive mandatory training on reading three-dimensional location data and combining it with terrain maps. Additionally, the cold case unit formally adopted the Reconstruction first procedure, meaning that in every cold case, before re-interviewing witnesses or suspects, the team first builds a complete time-distance model to identify impossible elements in statements. This improvement stemmed directly from the Ethan case, where only after a full cell site model was constructed did the friend group's statements reveal their implausibility. The unit also stressed the importance of long-term evidence management, particularly for items of unclear value at collection. The Ethan case showed that a fragment of nylon and a piece of tape, seemingly meaningless at first, became pivotal evidence when compared to testimony more than a decade later. Therefore, evidence storage policy was updated to ensure maximum preservation of items in every missing persons case rather than disposal when no initial value is seen. Finally, the summary emphasized the case's impact on the state's entire cold case investigative process. The Ethan Rios case became a textbook example incorporated into new investigator training programs, demonstrating that a seemingly unsolvable file can still be resolved when technology, methodology, and persistence are properly combined. The cold case unit concluded that the case changed how the entire state approaches old missing persons files. Rather than viewing them as unsolvable, they are now seen as technical puzzles that can be solved with sufficient data and perseverance. With this summary, the Ethan case closed, not only legally, but also established a new standard for long-term investigative work in New Mexico. Looking back at the entire story of Ethan Rios' disappearance and murder, spanning from 2006 to 2018, many details clearly reflect realities of contemporary American life, particularly how communities, technology, and the legal system interact in emergencies. A major lesson comes from the initial investigative delay. In 2006, when cell site data was not widely used, authorities could not reconstruct the Impala's journey or detect Cole's phone on US 550. This reminds us that in modern society, proactively using technology, from phone location sharing, security cameras, to communication devices, is not just personal convenience, but a life or death factor in missing persons situations. In the United States, where rural areas, deserts, and Rocky Mountains, like Jemez, remain vast, everyone should maintain habits of leaving travel information, sharing locations with friends or family, especially when attending evening events or traveling alone. Another lesson comes from the behavior of Ethan's friend group. In the story, Cole, Ryan, and Adrian all gave contradictory statements, concealed the truth, and did not seek help immediately when Ethan was injured. This is a very common pattern in American teen culture. Fear of getting in trouble outweighs the duty to report. However, the Ethan case clearly shows covering up, delaying, or fearing punishment can make consequences irreparable. This is especially important for youth education in the United States, where Good Samaritan or life-saving immunity programs encourage young people to call 911 without penalty in emergencies. Finally, the cold case unit's efforts demonstrate that no matter how much time passes, the truth can still be found when technology advances and communities persist in seeking answers. This is a powerful reminder that justice, though slow, can still be achieved, but it depends on every individual fulfilling their responsibility from the beginning. Thank you for following this entire 12-year-plus investigation journey. If you want to continue joining us for in-depth investigative stories like the Ethan Rios case, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring cases that changed how America pursues the truth.